One of the things that this new AI world is reminding me of is the days of Twitter Bootstrap. You remember Twitter Bootstrap?
Yeah, sure.
Right? That was super interesting. Twitter had designed their interface to work in a particular way, to look a particular way, and everybody was in awe of it, and they open sourced it. They open sourced that design system, and they made it available to literally everyone. And what happened in that world is that literally every website began to look exactly the same because it was a good design system. People were familiar with it. And if you look at websites from whenever that was, the 2010s, I think, roughly speaking, all the websites looked exactly the same. And it really made the web boring. And at some point, you just began to kind of tune it all out. Sure, you knew where to kind of find specific menu items, but everything looked the same. There was no originality, there was no creativity, and there was no innovation. And I feel like we're running the same risk by all of us using these AI tools because they're all trained on the LLMs that they're based on are all trained on the same material. And so if you think about it, whether you're using Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, whatever it is that your tool is using, it's all based on the same foundational material, which in theory means that the same queries are all going to get some version of the same answer. And we're all going to end up creating very similar, very Twitter bootstrappy type of experiences for our customers once again. And so what's interesting about that is that every time that you prompt an AI to give you some kind of output, whether it is a synthesis of research, whether it's a design, whether it's an idea or some content that you're working on, I think you really have to push yourself to remember that, number one, it's an untested assumption. And it's made it up on a series of patterns that are common across all of these LLMs, which not only risks you building the wrong thing, but being lost in a sea of similarity, right? Everything's going to look exactly the same. And how are you going to stand out in that sea? Where's the creativity and where's the innovation? I think it's really important that no matter how compelling or how convincing AI output looks, we have to remember that it is that system's best guess about how to answer your question. And that guess is based on a series of untested assumptions in your context. And super important that you take that output and you question it thoroughly and you run it through its paces and you fix or modify or optimize or iterate on the things that don't actually make sense in your context.
Here's what I've been thinking about. We worry a lot that AI might hallucinate, but actually what's happening is AI is always hallucinating. Like every single answer is the same, and the ones that we think are bad, we call hallucinations. But the process by which it comes up with an answer, it's the same computational process. So how do we tell the difference between, a thing we call a hallucination and a thing we call as a useful answer? So I think like this thing that we've been saying to each other, AI outputs are untested assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the way I understand that, right? Which is that all of it is kind of derived from an algorithm and it's a good start. I use it. I get value from it. It's a good start, but it's not a good end. And so how do you get from a good start to a good end? Well, you have to engage with it and test it and validate it and make it better. And then depending on what you're working on, that process for testing it and validating it is going to look different. So if you're working on a piece of writing, you're just going to be an editor and you're going to fix the writing. But if you're asking it to do market research, that's a different kind of validation, right?
Look, and I think it's critical, right? To remember, I think there's a lot of fear out there that it's going to take our jobs, it's going to cut humans out of the process. It's not. It's a good thinking partner, but the creativity, the innovation, the context,
and responsibility.
Right. And because it doesn't take responsibility for what you put out there. You do is human. And that's going to make us even more critical in the product creation process.